creators, welcome back to the club. We're your hosts. I'm Ebony Chapman.
And I'm Akila Friend.
And today we are joined by Jaleesa Black. She's a family therapist. We are so excited to talk to her. So family therapy, also referred to as couple or marriage therapy, family systems therapy, or counseling. This is a branch of psychology that works with families and couples and intimate relationships to nurture, change, and development. Okay, so let's just welcome
all of
the things. Let's welcome Jaleesa to the club.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today. I'm super excited.
We're super excited to talk to you today because we really feel like therapy is the new Black. Like legitimately everyone right now is talking about therapy, talking about mental health, mental wellness checks. And, there's a ton of resources out there for therapists, how to get in contact with one. So can you please just tell us a little bit more about like your background, a little bit more about you, like give the people what they came to hear. So let them know who you are.
Yeah, so right now, again, my name is Jaleesa Black. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. And so I have been practicing therapy for about 6 years now. And so I currently work in private practice. And so right now I am serving majority adult populations. I work with couples right now, families. I see individuals for multiple issues around like attachment issues, abandonment, self-esteem, also a lot of depression, anxiety, anything that you can name, relationship difficulties, grief, loss. I work from a very person-centered, attachment-based kind of solution-focused background. So I like to give a lot of my clients very concrete tools to use to work through some of the things that they may be dealing with or the blocks they may be facing that come up currently in the relationships that they have. I have a background where I used to work in community mental health, which is a totally different framework for people. It's a lot more accessible for lower income families and communities. And so there I did a lot of family therapy, working with populations that were basically teens that were on probation. And so there I did a lot of work on trying to rehabilitate them, get them the resources they need, the community, positive influence, things like that, so that they can work through some of the grief, the issues they were coming up against with poverty, having to do things, to kind of get their needs met the best way that they could. And so there I did a lot of work around the family system, communication, a lot of conflict resolution. And so that's just a little bit about what I've been doing for these past couple of years now, working with a lot of adolescents and stuff, but definitely love what I do. Everyone is so different. No case is the same, but it's great work, really fulfilling.
I mean, honestly, you run the gamut about a lot of things. And I feel like that's incredible to only just have you as a resource within the community and outside the community. Of course, I know you don't generally just solely deal with Black people and people of color, but the themes that you named, abandonment, grief, probation, for better or for worse, those names and those ideals, I feel like to me really trigger Black people specifically, right? And so like, I don't know if there's something, or if you've seen an influx of your patients being, or your clients, I should say, being Black, and potentially if that was the reason that you decided to even jump in the field to begin with.
Yeah. And so what made me jump in the field was actually my own battle with some mental health issues that I was experiencing in college. And so having my own kind of experience on being the receiving end of trying to be a client and enter this field and just trying to find the right fit for someone that you feel comfortable enough with, that's warm enough, that's going to be able to understand your story, I found difficult. And also just finding the space to be able to get actual services frequently enough to really get the impact of it. Because I think a lot of the time we may search for mental health resources or try to connect, find therapists, things like that. And it's just so hard. And then it's extremely expensive. So it cuts out a lot of people in that way, in the same sense. And then there's not a lot of therapists of color. And so once we're full, our calendars are booked and we have 30, clients, it's kind of, that's it. And so it's very hard for people to get that accessibility. And so that's what kind of led me into wanting to go into the field myself. And so, since being there, I do see a lot of racial traumas that we go through that that basically triggers and offsets, I think, a lot of other things that we deal with, whether it's also community, like navigating community violence or boundary setting. It's like we have so many different things that we're kind of maneuvering with our identity in itself and all the different intersections of it, that it ends up bringing up so much from the surface from like previous generations. And then you start seeing this cycle of like generational trauma that gets passed down, and people have not really learned how to deal with it, how to deal with different issues they may be going through, how to express their feelings, their emotions. And then that's when we end up having all of these other offshoots to some of these symptoms and in these issues.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I definitely have had my like stint with therapy. So I definitely tried, so I had Kaiser, and then I was like, okay, I was on my dad's insurance for X amount more months. And I was like, I might as well take advantage of this. You guys got therapy? Let me hop on the train. So I started doing therapy. And so I ended up getting a younger, like white woman. She's very sweet, very nice. I really did like her. But it was a little awkward sometimes bringing up like issues or things that I may be going through because of like my race or something of that nature. So it was kind of like, are you going to understand me? Are you going to get it? Are you able to kind of give me what it is that I'm looking for or need in this moment? Because like you're white and really don't get it. And so for me with my therapy journey, it's kind of what I've noticed. Now, I don't know if this is every therapist, but what I've noticed is like, they're not really there to like give you advice. It's kind of like they ask you the questions and then kind of let you reflect on that answer. And then you kind of figure it out along the way. And so, and you're nodding your head. Yeah. So it sounds like that kind of sounds like the vibe of therapy.
Opposite, I would say too, with me, when it comes with therapy, and obviously, yeah, give your take on this, but for me, it's more like, no, almost every session or most sessions, there is a solution. There is a, next step. There is some sort of like tangible advice that you can do. And perhaps it depends on the person. Because for me, I would see it more as like, am I wasting my time if I'm just talking and there's nothing? Where's the takeaway?
Where's my homework? I literally was like,
homework?
Are you going to give me homework? Want me to like journal and write 10 things down tomorrow? What are we going to check back in on next session?
And then for me to recognize like, okay, this person's actually listening to me because they have some sort of like tangible thing that they want me to do to then better myself. So like, I'm curious if both, I love the by the way, because that really sounded very much like a therapist right there. Saying all the things.
So sorry.
Of course.
I'm like, I say, I can't help it. I cannot.
I love it.
Yeah. No, as you're talking about it, it makes me think about the whole focus of like culturally competent therapy, because I've noticed when I work with communities of color, whether they're Hispanic, whether they're Black, we as a community, I think, look for more answers. We need some solutions. We look for some guidance. And I think what people don't always understand in therapy is that therapist can play multiple hats or roles. It just depends what type of therapist you're looking for. And as a therapist myself, I am very solution-based. And so it's more of a very like coaching kind of role of like, okay, let's go try this. You present these problems to me. We talk through it. I listen. It's almost like making sense of the chaos in your head. You come and you spill, you vent, you drop everything. And then basically I sort it out and I reflect it back to you. That makes sense to you to be able to digest and figure out, okay, where am I needing help at? Where am I blocked? Because when we tend to have these different issues, whether we're in depression, our brain is foggy. And I tell people all the time, your brain is not operating at the 100% that you think it is when you have so much going on at one time. And so it helps to have that outside perspective sometimes to be able to explain like, hey, I'm seeing a pattern here. Like you're not being able to communicate certain things to people or feelings, or you're having certain thoughts come up. And I wonder where else I'm seeing this come up in your life. And how do we break that? How do we stop it there, right? How do we reprocess and rework through some of these blocks you're having so that they store differently in your brain and you can move past them? Because at the end of the day, therapy, we're not magicians. We don't wave a magic wand. You're not going to be just perfect after you're done with a session or two, or you've been in it for a month. It doesn't work like that. And so I try to set a very realistic expectation of it's a long process of unwiring certain habits you have built for years. And so I think where people get confused and stuck is like needing to really adjust to your client specifically. Some people are okay with coming into the room and they just need someone to listen to them. Maybe they come from a background, they have a lifestyle where they don't feel heard, they don't feel seen, they don't have a voice. And so sometimes all that space does is create that, and that's enough to create change. Some people, they have that, but they don't know what to do, with certain issues that come up. And then that's where that comes into play, where it's like, maybe you are a client that would benefit more from a solution-based type of therapist, or a therapist that does a lot of like cognitive behavioral therapy, because that involves a lot of exercises, a lot of homework, journaling, a lot of processing and work on your end, which is great, but some people don't respond well to it. And so I take on that role of like needing to consult with people that potentially want to be clients of mine, and needing to decide, okay, well, what type of role do I need to play in the room with you? What would you respond best to?
I think that's incredible, because it shows that literally in therapy, as in all things, it's not a one size fits all approach. And I think that's part of I think for us nowadays, whereas beforehand, there may be less of or more of a hesitation. Like now when I get on the phone and I'm thinking through my catalog of like my healthcare representatives, I'm like, are they Black? Like, can you direct me to the directory of all Black dermatologists, of, physicians, of therapists, all the things? I want all Black in my corner. Whereas perhaps a few years ago, I would have been less inclined to even think that as of a thing. But
I'm to even ask, because you would already assume that there was a lack of already.
Right. And so, but I think with that too, that's part of the solution. But then obviously, like, as you said, there's multiple levels of like therapy, and them potentially having the competence of that to help you with your specific needs. But I'm curious with all of that, I'm curious if, because one thing that I was thinking out with therapy and potentially having a Black therapist, which, I do have now, but I was always wary, like, man, would they overlook certain things that I'm saying because they know the struggle? They know what it is to potentially be Black. So potentially something that you're saying that a white therapist or a Hispanic therapist or Asian therapist would see and be like, oh no, that's actually effed up. Like a Black therapist would probably be like, yo, like that's my uncle. Like that's my aunt. I've seen it and it's normal. So they're probably overlooking or glazing over certain things. Like I'm curious if that's been something that you've experienced or had to really tackle on as when dealing with Black clients. So like, no, like, yes, we may have similar stories, but I'm going to treat this as like, you're a person, and potentially, yes, this is something that Black people need to deal with in society, but it doesn't need to be something that we don't address, anyway.
Yeah, right. And I think two things. So one, it does help almost to be able to just have that empathy and relate and be able to see where you're coming from. Two, the great thing about therapists is we also are usually encouraged and typically have therapists of our own in a community of colleagues, because for one, we also need people that can give us outside perspectives and look for our blind spots. And one thing about being a really good therapist that I think personally is being able to really be honest and transparent about your experience, even with certain clients, because that's when transference comes into the room. And so that's when you need to be able to like look at yourself and see what's coming up. Like, am I really giving this client the best quality of care that I could right now? Or am I having biases? Or am I being able to align too far in a certain direction? Am I really giving them the services that they really deserve and need? And so a lot of the time we will consult cases, especially being a group practice, being in community mental health. You are in certain spaces where you do have to kind of touch base with other clinicians just to make sure you're still practicing as ethically as possible. Because you don't want to just have therapists out here giving out wrong advice or giving too much advice, telling people what to do with their life, and you don't honestly know what that solution, should be for them. And that's where it's like, yes, we may come up with options, but at the end of the day, you have the autonomy to pick what's best for you. Yeah. And so, I think that's part of like needing to check ourselves sometimes, because we're still human. It's bound to sit in the room. And I would be lying if I'd say I haven't sat in rooms with certain clients and be like, man, had you not been a client, we probably would be friends. Like, I like you, like as a person, And so it's just like all about needing to constantly even do self-reflecting on our end.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I think that's good to know and like good insight, because I feel like I would assume that as a therapist, you would take a lot of energy home. You would need some type of debriefing of your own to kind of be like, woo, we're letting go of all that energy today. There was a lot going on. People really had a lot of trauma I dealt with today. And that, that weighs on you, and you would need some type of release or community to kind of help you release that. Earlier in what we talked about, you mentioned the word boundaries.
Yes.
And so I kind of want to dive into that a little bit, and like, what exactly did you mean by boundaries? And we'll just start there.
Yeah. So when you ask that, do you mean in regards to just like what work we do, what work I do with clients around boundaries, or?
Yes, that was exactly what you said. Like, just Black community, your clients with boundaries. You said you work with them with creating.
Yeah. So I notice a lot of my clients have sometimes struggles with perfectionism. And so a lot of, and people pleasing as well. And so with those types of things, I've realized a lot of those behaviors are rooted in a very anxious attachment. And so this fear around being judged, being, misinterpreted, just like this fear around being rejected as well. And when we have those types of things come into play, even just cognitively, and we're thinking certain thoughts about ourselves, then it's hard for us to have appropriate, healthy relationships that are actually very balanced. And when we're anxious, we tend to give more, we're pouring into other people, we're letting people kind of like make their own decisions about the types of things that come up in the relationship, because we have this fear of not wanting to upset someone else. And so a lot of the time your emotions can be almost rooted in the reactions that other people have of you. And so with that, a lot of people I notice tend to have very poor boundaries when it comes to saying no to things they don't really want to do, just kind of sticking to their own value systems, just feeling more aligned and safe and secure in themselves. And so a lot of the work we do explores like what those boundaries are and how to set healthy ones for themselves and for others, where it's like, I can know and value my own opinion and value yours as well without compromising myself. I can have certain relationships, friendships, romantically, family as well, and respect your views, but also put a line down that also shows my limits, where I also demand a certain level of respect, but in a very respectful way. Because I like to talk to people a lot too about different types of boundaries, because I think sometimes people have poor boundaries and then they jump to the extreme of having very rigid boundaries where they're like, I don't want to be close to people. I don't want to talk. I don't want to let people in. I don't want to be vulnerable. And that's not boundaries. That's not healthy boundaries either.
Yeah.
It's like having that middleman of like, I can do both. I can be alone and I can be okay in that without being fearful. And I can also let people in without being scared as well in that sense.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I think that like I identify with that a lot, actually. I talked to when I had a therapist. At the moment, I don't have a therapist. I switched insurance. So we're
okay. Nothing to do with the therapist.
Okay.
I am figuring out my insurance situation. I am now a full-on adult and adult. But yes, but yeah, I definitely identify with that. So when I did have my therapist, that was something that I always would talk to her about. And it's something that I'm very open with, like telling my friends, like, okay, I recognize in myself that I have these qualities. I recognize that I also want to change this, but the behavior in which I need to do to change it is like, I'll do something, I'll be like, I'm proud of myself. I put the boundary up, and then the next situation, I might fall back into bad habits. So it's just like constantly always being aware and trying to check yourself. And so it does get complicated, but at the same time, it is,
it's part of your journey.
It's part of the journey.
Yeah. I think kind of with that too, just, I want to talk about the rise when it comes to, we kind of teed it up, but like the popularity and the rise of needing a therapist, having a therapist within mental the Black health community, mental health as a whole. Yeah. I know, especially, we can talk about 2020 all day as like kind of being a catalyst for a ton of folks. And I'm curious, on the receiving end, did you see like an influx of new patients?
Right, like one day you had 4 and then after you had like 45.
It's like, listen, the books are closed. I can't have anybody else, like, or within your private practice that you work within. I'm curious, what has been the influx when it comes to professionally that you've seen of Black people really deciding to take therapy into their own reins? Because we talk about it on social media, we perhaps have friends who get joined, but did they really go ahead and make the transaction when it comes to therapy?
I think I definitely saw an influx of people of color, like reaching out, looking for therapy, even if they couldn't afford necessarily our practice, going elsewhere, maybe with insurance or some of the other more affordable like platforms people can reach out to. And I think it did. I think what 2020 did was slow everyone down to the fact of like even needing to kind of reflect on where their life was at that point, whether it was like where it was professionally and not being happy in that space, maybe trying to find their purpose, maybe needing to really talk about the depression they may be feeling, about, you know, things that come up when we have to sit and be still. And we are usually so busy as a people and just as a community and just in the world in general that once COVID hit and it was kind of like, well, I can't go out, you know, every weekend, or I can't be going traveling here and doing this and kind of ignoring some of the things that I've been battling with. Now it's like, okay, they're hitting me in the face and it's hard. It's hard to deal with. It's hard to process, you know, whether it's people having like different things come up in their dreams and memories pop in, and just like being faced with having to reevaluate all their relationships. I definitely saw more people wanting to reach out and actually really get help and move forward and better themselves. And also just a lot of people not being employed at that time, it left room too for people to take the space to be like, this is the perfect time to work on me. This is the perfect time to be better and to come out on the other end of this with something different that I can benefit from.
Yeah, that is, I think that was literally my journey, because literally for not years, but like multiple years and years for a while, you know, friends have been like, oh, you know, you should try therapy, or they've started therapy. And for me, it was always like, what am I going to sit in this chair and talk to this person about? Like, I was more like about I think kind of going back to the solutions, like, what am I really going to be getting out of this that makes sense for me to sit there and talk, and like, how do I even begin? And so that was kind of my hesitation, not even hesitation, but my like not seeing the value. Like, I saw the value, obviously talking to people and working on yourself in that reflection piece, but how does that work with someone completely new? And what would be the source that I would need to go in and solve this specific problem at this specific time? And so I think 2020 helped me get to a point where I'm kind of like, well, all right, I don't have the answers, and it's okay, because perhaps I can lean on this person to then guide the conversation. Where as before, I'm like, if I'm not coming to you with something, you don't know me, and I'm supposed to come to you and say whatever. And then like, see, and I think
that's I feel like for me, like that's the magic, because for me, I'm like, oh, you can talk to your friends, but they may not like get it, you know, like they don't understand where you're coming from, and nor are they going to come at it with the lens of care and love and concern, or, you know, they might be like, girl, bye, that ain't even nothing. So, like, you know, they could totally blow you off, and then that makes you feel like, okay, did I not just pour my heart out to you? Like, did I not just give you a whole conversation, give you a piece of me, and you just threw it off? Like, you know, it could make you feel away. As to like a stranger or a trained therapist, they're there to actually listen to what you have to say and to kind of give you that support in that space that you need. Because sometimes, like you said, people do just need to vent. Like, I just need to talk to someone who can listen to what I have to say and not give me a judgment. I don't want to feel judged about how I feel.
Yeah, I'm like, what the hell is that? Yeah, but I hear that. That's true. It's all very valid. I'm curious too, like, because there was another thing that you mentioned up top, and Ebony could say the quote, the specific numbers behind it, but obviously you mentioned probation, you mentioned income, you mentioned poverty, a lot of core themes that would not only bring someone to therapy, but at least for you at the beginning when you were doing more community mental health, that these are some of the core things that you would see. And so I'm curious from that level, these aspects of the population, because oftentimes when I think of therapy still, I think of it as something like you got discretionary income, you got a little bit splurge, and then now you have the time and the money to work on yourself from a professional lens. Like, when you're trying to just have a couple jobs together to put food on the table, to have a roof over your head, I think the last thing you're thinking about is, can I spend $100+ extra a month plus being that keyword, dollars a month,
Yes.
on someone to tell me about my life that I already know. And so that's kind of where I'm like, a lot of folks may be thinking. So for you working within those populations that may not have seen this as a luxury, what were some of the major themes that you dealt with? What were some of how did you even get to them?
How do you get to the clients? How do the clients come
to
to you? Because it
Yeah.
seems like that door would kind of be like something they wouldn't want to walk through.
Right.
Oh yeah, working with a population that was involved with the juvenile justice system, probation, there's a lot of resistance, a lot of distrust, a lot of people closed off was like core themes. And most people were in spaces where they did not even want to kind of take a look in the mirror and really talk and identify like all the things that were kind of like crashing around them in their life. And so one, it was just a big journey to just get them to trust me in the room and trust like this is someone who cares. Because when we think about situations like that and kids that have been on probation or families that are struggling and mental health issues and people not getting the resources and the assistance they really need, it causes a lot of people to be fearful of mental health in itself, because we hear about social workers taking people's children away, splitting up families. And so they don't want people to really come in and see what's happening because they are scared of their family being broken up or things getting worse or someone getting in real trouble. And so needing to come in from a very caring space of like, hey, like, I really see it. I get it. I'm here to more so than anything help you. And moving into, and that's when I say like, even as therapists, we put so many different hats on, where now it's like, I'm here really to be doing a lot of therapy clinical work on like working through maybe your anger issues or parenting skills and things like that. But now I'm actually seeing like what is happening in your life once you've trusted me. And now I need to be a case manager. Like I need to find you resources. I need to get you abilities to be able to have some access to transportation for free, bus passes, whatever it is, where there's other kind of nonprofits and other systems in place that actually provide these services for a lot of families. It's just they don't have the knowledge of it. A lot of people I used to work with also didn't have access readily to computers, internet. So they don't know what's out there. They don't know, call 211 and ask for certain things and they can let you know what's in your area. They don't know these things. And so it's almost like coming in, teaching, and then also helping show them and role model, this is how you gain access to this stuff. These are the questions you ask. This is who you go to, so that they can start getting more protective factors around them. So we can sit and actually do the work of working through some of these traumas, because being in poverty, it's traumatic. It's not easy. It's hard. You're constantly scared or worried about where this next meal is coming from. How am I going to provide for this child? Like, how are they going to get their needs met? The world doesn't just stop rolling, you know? And so there's still that desire for children to be children, keeping up, you know, with the Joneses, being in, you know, so they don't feel like an outsider. You know, it's still just so many different pressures people don't sit really and think about. Like, how does that affect someone if they're getting teased every day because they don't have the latest shoes on, or they can't do this, or they don't know that, you know? And so it becomes a lot where it starts bearing on people's mental health. And it's like, they need those extra support systems. They need a nice like place to go after school, people they can look up to that are older, that are in positions that maybe they may want to go into, someone who's in music, someone who's in, you know, journalism or mental health or a doctor or this, like they need access to that so they can at least see like, wow, there's other ways for me to kind of exist and other paths to go down.
I think that is
Can
amazing.
you explain what 211 is for people who don't know? And
yeah, so it's like the information line here in like LA. So you can call them and basically they have access to look up in their databases and stuff like that, different resources, food banks, all types of stuff. And so that's another resource I would utilize a lot to even help people find housing, or companies and nonprofit agencies or whoever that provide housing relief for people with low income, or that are, you know, with Medicare and stuff like that, or Medi-Cal.
For sure. And I know we have a lot of East Coast listeners, or potentially New York. So that number I think is 311 for other folks on the East Coast. So that's great. And I'm curious too, like, for, obviously you mentioned a lot of the things, like you're a child and the traumas of just trying to be normal in school, trying to, you know, fit in, et cetera, and how that can weigh on someone's mental health. But I'm curious if you also touch on that from an adult perspective, and that, as you mentioned, that generational trauma, probably we can get into that, because what I recognize and what I was reminded of, which is, you know, very, very different, but I think, what is it, like Sunsets in Hollywood, something in on Netflix, I forget the exact title of the show, but it's like they sell real estate, but it's also reality, you know,
Yes.
et cetera. But I remember one of the Selling Sunset, there it is.
Yes.
One of the castmates mentioned, like, you know, she was poor growing up, and that kind of stuff sticks with you, you know what I mean? Like in terms of being made fun of, or not having enough, or not having what other children have, et cetera. So I'm curious how that then relates to the generational trauma and potentially being parents now of kids, and working through that, whether they are again in poverty or in some other aspects. So I'm curious, how do you deal with generational trauma from sometimes some of those same core issues within families?
Yeah, and I also just want to, like, you know, because obviously we're not making this up, you guys. I want to just read like a quick stat so that, you know, before Jaleesa goes into that, just so that people really can get a good mental, you know, idea of how many people are actually in poverty. So according to the Mental Health of America, more than 1 in 5 Black and African American people in the US lived in poverty as of 2018. Black and African American people living below poverty are twice as likely to report serious psychological distress. So that's a huge number, considering that in the total population of the US, Black people only make up 13.4%.
Yeah. And it's so sad. It's really hard to see and deal with. And you ask, how does that affect the parents, right? And how that continues this whole cycle. It's like a constant, imagine constantly being under chronic stress every day, growing up, and then into adulthood, you're always feeling like you're behind and you're trying to catch up. And it's like being under that chronic state of stress, it just stays with you to a point where it becomes so kind of ingrained in your daily life, you forget it's there and you've learned how to operate with it. And so you don't even realize all the underlying anger you may have, the depression, you know, just how much you may be stressed about even having to take care of your own children, being in cycles where you couldn't even really develop and grow as a person yourself because you didn't have the time, the access. Maybe you had to work as a kid. You know, maybe at that point, all you saw was, maybe it's easier right now for me to kind of like utilize the government and take up these resources because I don't see a way out. I don't see people like me, or I don't feel I even have the ability to kind of like go down those paths. It's like people get cut off so soon and they don't even get relief, that they get stuck in these patterns. And that's why it's like hard, because that passes down, where it's like always this worry about money. Where are we getting it from? How do we maintain it? Like not even also knowing how to manage it once you have it. And it's so multifaceted, and we would sit here for hours trying to discuss really what happens when you intersect poverty with your own mental health, and in the ways that it really affects people constantly. And honestly, we need to do more work around that and getting people real wages to live off of and stuff like that. But that alone, it takes so much work in just helping people kind of educate themselves, like get that knowledge, get that support emotionally, because they don't always have it, because there's other people just like them dealing with the same struggles. And at that point, everyone's just like, I'm just making it through. I'm surviving. I can't help you. I can't be a container for your emotions if you are angry or sad about this stuff, because I'm in it. And that's where we come into play. And it's like, that's where community mental health comes in, where you need those resources, you need that outlet, you still need to vent, you still have problems every day, you need someone to help you find solutions. And that's where that positivity can come into play and start helping, trying to break some of those traumas, and just even knowing like, these are all the things I went through as a kid. And that's why I'm having a hard time even like understanding my child's, you know, issues, or I can't even be present for them, or I'm not there. Or I, you know, because I have to work all the time. Like we don't even think about that. If you are in poverty and you're a single parent, then you have to work multiple jobs to just make it. If you didn't have the access or the ability to go to college, you don't have the ability to move up into certain positions that would really give you the financial relief you need. So guess what? you're absent from your child for long extended periods of time. They may feel abandoned. They may not be able to get that emotional connection with you. So they may turn to other things that aren't healthy, that aren't good for them. And now look, then it's like you end up in that cycle where now they're on probation for doing X, Y, and Z. And now it's like, well, where did we go wrong? And it's not the parents' fault. It's not them. It's the system.
It's the system. It's more than a cycle. It's also like a web. Like you mentioned,
yes.
I mean, there's a lot of things going on generationally and with, you know, your own singular life, but there's so many touch points where there's breakages when it comes to the US, when it comes to just like trying
really
to live a healthy life,
resources and giving the cushion, right?
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, if you're running on a hamster wheel, then the other thing falls too.
Yes.
It's like that unbalanced scale. So
Yes,
it's like you
exactly.
kind of keep it together, and once something falls up, you're literally spiraling. And so I also just want to be clear. So the 211 is a resource that people could use if they need a little extra help and cushion.
Yes.
Do you have any names of like those community therapy centers that people could reach out to?
Yeah. I'm the one I used to work with was Shields for Families. We have Kedron Mental Health also as well. There's multiple different resources that you can reach out to, even for housing, which I can give you some of this information if you would like it to just kind of like add, you know, to your kind of repertoire and to be able to give people if needed.
Yes, we're definitely going to put it in the bio. So you guys are listening, you'll see it in our bio, we'll see it on our social media, all the things, because people need to really know about this. And I'm curious too, from your perspective. So we talked about 2020 kind of being that influx, or you've seen kind of an increase in Black people specifically, obviously everyone, but we're talking about Black people specifically seeking more mental health or putting their self-care as a priority. Also, I'm curious if you specifically, being a female in the family and family therapist realm, if that's something common that you see, because from we can say, according to Zippa, the career expert, 68.6% of all marriage and family therapists, so nearly 70% of all marriage and family therapists are women, while about 24% are men. So I'm curious if that's just kind of a reflection of therapy overall, if that's you generally see more women going into the field versus men, or specifically for family therapy. And if yes, why do you think there is such a difference when it comes to more females looking into wanting to be in this profession?
Yeah, I definitely see that translate as well to clientele. It's mostly women. And I think it's just almost societal expectations. I think we're a little bit more open to feelings and emotions and some of the messages we've gotten and just in general. And so I think we're a little bit more willing to kind of like be very vulnerable in that way. And I think it's very hard sometimes for men to be able to see the duality of even their identity, of being able to still be very masculine and still be in touch with themselves. And so, not to say it's not happening, I am seeing more men reach out for therapy and want to work on traumas that they've had as children and issues they might have had with their mothers and things like that. But there's definitely more women that reach out for services and that really continue with it. And I think as time kind of goes on, we educate more and more people about what it looks like sitting in the room with a therapist. I think it becomes a little less scary, where then people feel a little bit more open to like, okay, I can kind of set the tone for what I need this to look like and what I need it to be for me, and move forward in that sense.
Yeah, so it's not like what they see in the movies, like you're laying down on the couch and they're trying to like hypnotize you, and then they're like, tell me how you feel about that, and then they're like sleep on the couch or something after taking notes. So it's not like that, okay?
No.
It's not like that at all. Speaking of like men therapists or like men going, can we talk about men and their mental health? Like, can we talk about this?
Yeah.
Because I just feel like I've seen more of I'm sure everyone has seen more of like an influx of like men talking about mental health.
Yes.
But I feel like Black men, period. I mean, women too, but I feel like Black men really hold to a strong sense of self, meaning like they have to hold it up and hold it together for everybody. For the men that are either taking care of their moms, you know, like you said, they get into the cycle happens, you get into bad habits, you might be selling drugs, whatever it is that your vice is to like keep money and food on the table. Like half the time people do not even want to be doing these things, but they do it because they feel like they have to, and that's the only source of income. Quick money, fast money, a lot of it.
Or even if it's not that extreme, like just being a Black man, let's say on the opposite end of the spectrum, you probably went to school, you probably went to graduate school, and you just, you know, still are not seeking that extra level of, you know, self when it comes to therapy. Like, why do you feel that might be the case? Obviously, we said there's an influx, so the influx comes from men and women, so there are more people definitely being exposed to it. But why are just Black men in therapy? That's a whole other thing. But like,
I
we
just
definitely
really think that, you know, men hold
it.
on to a lot like of pressure because they are looked at as the head of household. They're looked at as the strong, like you have to support your woman, you have to support people around you, and especially Black men, like you're not just supporting your house but everyone else's household too, right? Like you see a lot of that in people who are super famous, who have a lot of money, and then they become broke after a couple years because they are taking care of everything, the pressure. So like, let's talk about men and like their mental health.
Yeah, I mean, I think with a lot of men in general, not only just Black men, they have gotten these messages that not only do they need to be strong, but that means not having any emotions, not showing any weakness, not being vulnerable, or showing like I'm stressed or wanting to cry. Like, I think it comes from the messages. And so a lot of the work that they come seeking therapy for, I'm seeing as far as like themes go, is trying to even get back in touch with their emotions. They've been so turned off for so long of like, you just need to kind of barrel through whatever stress or problems you have going on and get to the other end of it, that they don't even know what they're feeling anymore. They don't know what it is or why they're cut off or why they're cold emotionally. And they don't know how to connect with someone, whether it is another woman or male or whoever it may be. You know, and so it's almost like in therapy is very basic work. It's childlike almost, of like getting you back into being able to even label what it is you're going through, what your experience is. They don't know it. They've seen so much, they've been exposed to so much, whether it was, you know, from whoever was their caretaker or their mom or their father, or even how their relationships intertwined and how that parent dynamic worked. But they get to a point where they've been exposed to so much, but they don't even know how to process how that's made them work and act and interact with people, and what they took with them from those interactions and situations and what they didn't. And so a lot of the time it's just them trying to really make sense of like what their world is and how they're feeling about things and people in general, or why they have trust issues, you know, and so forth.
I mean, that is so true. And I think also on the flip side too, what we've seen, and I think less of, is you may be holding on to all those emotions, holding on to, you know, being able to hold it all together. And so then the person you're with, your significant other, most times you're, you know, women, if we're thinking of kind of straight relationships, but like, you know, then they would kind of unleash on the woman, whether it comes to just like being very emotional or having different things that they have to say, or like just expressing themselves, being violent sometimes, extreme when it comes to that. And as women, if we're thinking of holding things together, oftentimes in the familial structure, it's actually Black women who would be the ones that are more seen as, or I would say seen as, and expected to take care of everything. And sometimes that means taking care of your man and holding them down despite them not truly being all the way right with themselves. Like, I don't know if that's something that you've seen as well, or in this new generation of, hey, we all need to love and experience mental health. It's not as much of an issue.
Yeah, no, it definitely comes up still, where Black women and just women in general become that container. We are that framework that people don't normally have, especially when people are scared to talk to a stranger. They don't, like you said earlier, they have these different expectations, or, you know, this thought that, what are you supposed to do in therapy if you're not giving me any answers? If you can't fix the problems in my life right now for me, then why go? And so Black women end up being that space for everyone in their family, friends, whatever. They take on so much that it becomes very hard to even kind of really be able to manage their own stuff and their own problems, because they are kind of trying to be that secure base. And Black men having that problem with trying to regulate their emotions, sometimes they pour that out, like you said, either on one extreme where they're extremely emotional because they have no one else to turn to. So she is literally the only cup they can pour into that way, and they feel safe, which is great, but it can be overwhelming and it can be very much a lot to handle for one person. And then, or they could go to a different extreme where they are completely avoidant and they're a very avoidant attachment. And then that's when you see a lot of relationships where there may be someone who's more anxiously attached and trying to fight and prove that they're worth this love, and this other person pulling away because they don't know what that looks like. That emotion, too much. They're like, ooh, this is unsafe. I saw my parents. That didn't end well. I've seen other people. So they get in their head processed, and it stores traumatically of like, oh, I've seen what emotions do to people. I've seen what connection can do, and it didn't end well. And so they're scared that it'll end the same way for them. So it's like I pull and I push, and the other person pulls more in, and it creates this very unhealthy, toxic dynamic. And so if we can get people to be more secure in the way that they function and understanding where some of these concerns and these fears are rooted in, then they can learn more about themselves and how to regulate that, and how to even voice and vocalize what they need to feel safe, to feel secure, to have and build connection, because vulnerability is the source of connection. But we are all in, I think, this phase where I see just in general, and it may just be new generations, like it's hard to build that vulnerability and have a real connection. Everybody's running from it. Everybody wants it, but no one's willing to give it.
No one's willing to give it. People
do
love
the
the
work.
idea of,
No.
oh, I cut that off. Like that's nothing,
Yeah.
nothing to cut you off. For me, for 2021 and beyond, if my man is not in therapy, I don't want it. I don't even want to deal. I don't even want to deal with whatever could be you go to therapy.
Yeah, because I think that there's a lot of emotion, like we continue to say as a theme, like a lot of childhood trauma that you carry along with you. And even if you've had, I've been blessed in my life. Like I have been very blessed in my life, to speak about myself, because I can't talk about anyone else, but for me, I'm like, I've been very blessed in my life, but there's still things that I know for sure I take on, and it shows in other relationships that and it comes out in romantic relationships and friendships and other things. So it's like, there's other things that you still need to work on, even if you've had a pretty good upbringing, or, because it doesn't always have to be like, oh, it was super duper traumatic and I saw abuse in my life like that. It doesn't always that's not always the story.
Mm-hmm.
So there's therapy, and I just think it's healthy to just be mentally aware, because even with social media right now in 2020, whenever that happened, 2012 is when Instagram started, right? So when social media started and we have Kim Kardashian and everyone with the influencer vibes, that takes a whole mental health vibe too. So it's not, it doesn't have to be like family trauma. It can be also like environmental.
Right. And to speak to that, it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't always have to be necessarily from your childhood per se. Sometimes people can have very comfortable childhoods. The trauma may not come until certain interactions that happen as you get older, and those store in a very traumatic way for a person, where it's like, okay, I had a very bad experience with this person or this type of situation. And then it creates these responses from you from then on out. And so even to speak to that, like environmentally, like constantly social media, people struggling with managing and knowing how much to really digest and what to digest from social media, because it's easy to start comparing and contrasting your life, who you are as a person, all types of things. And I have a whole different opinion about just body image and social media in itself, and the damage it is doing to so many people. But it's so interesting that you mention it, because it's true. Not all trauma does come from your childhood. Sometimes it comes older, when you're older and you've had different things come up in your lifetime. So it's important to recognize that too as trauma, and being very much like experiences that have left some type of mark on you and that have ingrained in you in some way. Because I think when people hear trauma, they think, oh, I had to have gone through something super extreme for it to be so bad. And you don't. Yeah. It just needs to be something that impacted you enough emotionally that it left some type of mark on you.
We talked about body image, and I mean, just to bring that up real quick. I mean, we know right now the BBLs, the big booty, everything is so prevalent right now and extreme. And so that right there, I think can be traumatic. I think honestly, to be honest, there's just no way that like, I'm like, should I, you know what I mean? A little talk, a little something, right? I mean, I just watched a video about it, so no, I'm not gonna get it. It's way too much for me. But I feel like with just the body image, because what you see in the music videos, all the guys dating these types of girls, it's like their bodies are just like just ridiculously curvaceous. And so at one point you're like, do I need to start looking like that? Like, I'm single. Like, are people not going to want me because I don't look like X? You know, like, I think those thoughts do go through your mind, and it can be traumatic a little bit.
Very much so. Very much so.
I feel like when it comes to like just therapy, for me, another piece that made me to say like, okay, should I walk through this door or not type of thing is like, how long is this going to take? Like, how long would it take before I'm where I'm like living my life like it's golden, I'm walking through a field of lilies, all that kind of stuff. Like, but right now it's like, what I see is just like, okay, should I give it a year? Should I give it a couple months, a couple years? There are people who are in therapy for their entire life. There are people who literally, they jump through, different healthcare things and are still like, no, I need that therapist. So I'm now paying out of pocket for that therapist. And like, because I don't know if that's necessary or not. So yeah.
With the new therapist, you have to start over. That's what I'm thinking about. I'm like, now that I have to start over, I have to tell you my whole life story again and go through that whole trauma that I just already talked about with someone else.
Right.
And how long is this going to take?
How long does it take?
Right. And I so many people ask that. And I always have to tell them that it depends on how much you put into it, what you give it, how fully committed are you? How consistent are you also? And are you doing the work outside of the session? Because it's one thing for us to sit here and talk about what's happening and work through things and give suggestions and give options and all types of things that you can maybe go on and do and practice. But are you actually leaving our session and doing that as much as possible each week? You have to check yourself, do a check-in and ask, like, am I really committed to this process that I've started? Or is something blocking and preventing me from really giving it what I should? Because it's really important to ask yourself, like, what is stopping me from being the change I want to see? Because we can talk about it, but I can't do the change. I can't make the changes, can't find the solutions, right? You actually have to put the work in for it, And so it just depends on what it is we're working through, how much, because there's certain areas of your life that you may feel improve, and there's still maybe others that you still want to work towards and work on. And one thing is, it's not like therapy makes your problems go away. So you're always going to be hit with different obstacles all the time in your life. It's just, you'll start finding you bounce back and you react differently. You have a different response and you're able to digest it in a much healthier way where it doesn't feel so debilitating, where it's like, how am I supposed to deal with this? How am I supposed to get through this? I'm ready to just have a meltdown on the floor somewhere and just be stuck for hours. You'll be able to kind of like kind of go through those situations and be able to come out on the other side of them feeling a lot better about how you dealt and how fast you got through them.
When you say the different issues too, because I think, for me, when I officially took the plunge with therapy this year, and I was like, okay, let's see what the hype is about. Let's go in and let's really work on myself. And then we kind of dealt with the first piece that I was mentioning, and then I remember like 2 weeks ago, where I felt like not completely better, but I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm in a much better space. Everything is great. And so literally I'm in the session and she's there with me. And we're just like, she's asking me, okay, what are some of your challenges or highs and lows? And we're going through different things.
I'm fine.
And I'm like, I'm good, girl. Like, what's up? Like, I'm good. And then like later on, she was just kind of like, okay, you need to come here with exact issues that you might have that we can work through. Because I literally was like, I don't have at this point, like anything, when we think of the levels of trauma, like anything crazy that I'm like,
on your mind
this is like on my mind at this moment. Whereas when I first stepped in, oh my gosh, yeah, I had it. But now I'm like, not really. And so I'm curious for those that may be experiencing the same things or maybe having that thing when they even step in on day one and not knowing exactly what to say, or day 45. And now they're like, the first thing I had to say, we're good. The second thing I'm like, okay, like you help me. Now you have a little bit of story about me. Like, what are you getting from here? I'm curious, how do you figure out like what that potential next step could be? Or the next step is like, maybe therapy can be paused at this moment. I'm curious just what you would.
Yeah. And so there is a few different ways you can kind of go about that, right? For some people, that first core presenting problem may be resolved, right? But maybe over the course of therapy, we found out there's other deeper issues that maybe we need to get to, or maybe there's other things that aren't as pressing in the present moment, but could still be worth working on, talking through. So it really would depend on like what your treatment plan kind of looks like. Like, what are you looking to kind of improve? Even if it's like one part of your life that you needed really some work on is kind of resolved, are there any other things that may not necessarily be pressing, but be things that you want to work on just as a person to get better at? And then it could be also a second option of, like you said, sometimes it's okay to pause. If you don't need to come to me anymore, which is ultimately the goal, that's a good thing. I don't want to have to keep you in therapy for years at a time, unless you want to, unless, you just like the extra support in the space. But getting people to a spot where they're like, wow, like, I'm feeling a lot better about my life. I'm feeling more fulfilled. I'm more balanced. I'm happier. My relationships are working out a lot better. I know how to deal with these things a lot differently. That's perfect. That's a great reason to end therapy, and it's okay to do so. And I think it's just important for people to know that too. Just because you get locked in and you start this process doesn't mean it needs to go on forever and years. There's okay to be like, I'm good now, and take a break and maybe come back and revisit things if something new comes up for you that you're like, I don't know how to navigate this. I'm a new mom or something, or I'm having some postpartum, or, whatever it is. Then you can always come back and revisit.
Yeah, I love that. So I know we've talked about a lot. And so it's kind of, it's been heavy on just the conversation, but I want to know, like, what are some positive things that you've seen from your clients after going through a process of therapy?
Some positive things. I think it's because I don't actually get to go out into the world and see like what life is like for them. I think it really comes from sometimes those words of affirmation that they can give me, whether it's just knowing after a session we might have had that was really heavy, they might have came in really, really confused about life, or just about whatever topic it is, and being able to kind of walk away at the end of it like, wow, I feel so much better. Like, thank you so much, or I'm just a lot happier, or just seeing different relationships get better, marriages improve, like people being able to connect more, relate with their children, having a different way of being with them, I think is really super rewarding to see, because it's like, wow, not only are you getting better, but you're going to be better for them, and they'll live a better life because of it. And it's almost like this process that I think about of like, yeah, I'm planting seeds right now and doing that work, but that's going to go on for generations from now, because your kid will know how to regulate themselves better when they are feeling something. They'll know how to not stonewall, shut down, or react angrily, but maybe they'll know, like, let me take a pause, for my mom for a second, come back and tell her why my feelings are hurt, right? Because then they could teach that to their kids one day, where it's like, okay, people are learning just how to be better people to each other. Like, and I think that is like one of the more rewarding pieces that I get to see it in the room and just hear about it. Like, wow, that's the piece that makes all the work worth it.
Yeah, I would think so. Like, I just think hearing positive feedback from other people, and because I don't want it to get lost too, that like you're a family therapist, that you're working with moms and dads and children and people who are like going through relationship,
one of the biggest relationships that we can talk about,
because at the end of the day, like that's where you're going to, if you're a boy and you're looking at your mom, like that's your first relationship with a woman. If you're a girl looking at your dad, like this is the first relationship with a man. So it is so much important that we're building those relationships to be healthy,
taking it seriously,
and strong, and taking it seriously. So I commend all your clients
Thank
that
you.
are coming to you, because it is a really big deal to recognize in yourself, like, I'm not really doing the job I need to be doing.
Do more. I need to do more.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, sowing the seeds and doing things for generations to come. And I feel like, we can compare that a little bit on a smaller scale, but on a little bit to what's happening at the Black Creators Club. So the best way that you can support us is to share this show with a friend, and to subscribe to our YouTube page or our Apple Podcasts or Spotify pages. Everything is at the Black Creators Club. And when you do, please rate, please leave a comment, like, do all the things, just engage with us, because that is our positive affirmation to know, like, you know, we doing a good job.
You're doing a good job.
You're doing a good job.
Have guests that you think should come on the show, definitely email us at theblackcreatorsclub@gmail.com. And while you're looking at theblackcreatorsclub.com, make sure you go to our shop page where you can search our merch a little bit. You know, you're welcome. Sincerely, a Black creator. This is something, Jaleesa, I think you can rock, because you are literally the definition of expanding what it means to be a Black creator, and you're doing it your way, because you are showcasing to generations to come what it means to just elevate Black excellence. So you're welcome. Let's jump into the game that we have to play with you.
So we're so excited. We're gonna play a game. We are now switching gears because that was a really good and deep conversation. So now we're gonna have a little bit of fun with Jaleesa. And so this game is called 5 Things, or more like we're gonna give you 2 or 3 things, because because of the subject matter, we don't want to overwhelm the question. Okay, so I'm going to name a topic, and you're going to give a reason why someone would seek therapy. So we're going to give you 15 seconds, and you're just going to come up with like 2 or 3 things that would be solution or action based that someone could do if they were to come to you with this issue. Okay. So the first thing is grief. This person is feeling just really sad. Maybe they lost their husband or lost a parent recently, and they just really don't know what to do with themselves, how to gather themselves. They're not able to function that well in their daily lives because they're so upset. So what would be some action items or a solution that you could give them for them to walk away with?
Yeah, so someone experiencing grief, I would want them to first not pull away, but draw back into their community. So the people that they can lean on that are there, finding ways that they can kind of remember that person's memories, commemorate them, honor them in some type of way to help with that piece. And I would honestly want them to just be patient and kind with themselves during their grieving process, because they're going to go through so many phases, whether it's sadness, anger, disbelief, until they get to a place, which will take time, of being able to accept what that new life and reality looks like without that person being present.
Yeah, love that. So the next one, let's talk childhood trauma. So potentially you are the child that have experienced some sort of trauma, or perhaps later on in life you came in as an adult and you definitely still need to recognize and deal with the childhood trauma that you experienced. What are 2 things that someone can do in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, in a few ways to kind of reflect on that, I would want them to think about what messages or things they would have told that little girl or little boy. Like, what are some positive things they would have given them, some messages they wish they would have known back then, to first reflect on. Also, when working through like sometimes that childhood trauma, also knowing just how it impacted them. Like, I would want them to do a lot of reflecting, first, and understanding how deeply, some of these things have kind of impacted their lifestyle and who they are, right? And knowing how they even have dealt and regulated their own emotions in that time. Like, are they a more of an avoidant person? Are they a more of an anxious person? And then from there, learning ways to deal with some of that nervousness or that fear. So ways to do mindfulness. And I don't know if you all are very familiar with that, but needing them to come back into and being in the present moment. And so whether it's like mindfulness meditation or just taking moments to kind of like give themselves space to just sit and be still and think and question, like, if something happens, a situation comes up that's triggering, what are my thoughts and interpretations of this event? What am I telling myself? Because that is leading me to feel a certain way, and then I'm acting out in a certain way. So first, let's get in tune with who that voice is and what it's saying to you, so we can move forward from there.
Yeah, I know that we're like, it's supposed to be like a quick thing, but clearly now it's a full conversation, so it's fine. But can we just like talk about like the word or phrase childhood trauma, because I feel like it gets brought up a lot and we talk about it a lot, and people keep saying it and like turning it around, and it's like, what exactly is childhood trauma? What does that mean? What does that look like? What is childhood trauma? How could I identify how I'm feeling with childhood trauma?
Yeah, and so basically, childhood trauma is like any exposure to any type of like incident or series of events that might have happened when you were growing up as a child or infant or teen, that was like very emotionally disturbing or that felt life-threatening. And so it's like having that reaction of needing to like deal or feel safe in some way. And so a lot of the time being that young, you don't know how to respond to things like that in a healthy manner. You do what's best at that point. And at that point, you have to be a little more gentle and kind with that child inside of you, because you have to understand like all they did was learn how to regulate their emotions based on maybe what they saw from others. So if you had a parent that reacts to things in a very angry way, maybe that's how they regulate their emotions. They express it in anger, yelling, things like that, or maybe someone that was very shut down. So you just hold everything in and you deal with it that way. But a lot of the time, it's just like that response that we've learned on how to kind of like protect ourselves.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And that's true. And I'm glad that you were able to kind of give us that definition, because I feel like it's important, because we do talk
We don't
want to
make it like a trigger phrase. It's like, no,
Yes.
what does that
mean? Okay, so your next word is anxiety. We're going to even give you debilitating anxiety, something that people cannot function. Like for me, I definitely deal with anxiety, something where I'm like, it's like deer in headlights. Someone says something, I feel triggered. I don't know how to react. So what would be some things that you could solution-based give some advice on that one?
So when it comes to anxiety, I know people probably hear it all the time, but breathing is a really big one for people with anxiety. Of course, also grounding yourself in mindfulness is a great way to kind of bounce back from your anxiety, questioning your negative thoughts. But if you have the time, I would love to maybe present what an actual mindfulness technique looks like.
Let's do it.
So maybe that way it gives people a real clear understanding of like how to breathe. Okay. So this one, it's not super long or anything like that, but I do want to start by just making sure you both, and it's going to involve you closing your eyes. So I want to make sure you both are in like a very present, but kind of relaxed state and posture. Okay. And so now I want you guys to take a second and just close your eyes and just listen to my voice. And we're going to start with 3 slow, deep breaths. And when I say slow, I want you to breathe deeply in through your nose as much as possible. And I want you to exhale through your mouth like you're blowing through a straw. Okay. We're going to take 2 more. And I want you to take another deep breath all the way in through your nose. And I want you to breathe out through your mouth slowly. We're going to do 1 more. I want you to breathe all the way in. And I want you to breathe out through your mouth. And now I want you both to just imagine that you're sitting on a grassy hill overlooking a big open sky. Occasionally, a fluffy cloud emerges from the distance and it blows by. Afterward, it slowly drifts off into the horizon until it's no longer visible. Now take a thought or a judgment that's been bothering you lately, and I want you to try to visualize the thought as one of those clouds in the sky. Let the thought flow with the breeze, just as clouds do. Watch it float off into the distance and merge with the other clouds in the background. Remember to just let the cloud float away. Try not to follow it or bring it back. Just stay at that spot on the grassy hill overlooking a big open sky. And watch and observe your thoughts physically move away from you. I want you to continue visualizing any thoughts or feelings you've been having. And I want you to really try and visualize the physical distance between yourself and those negative thoughts as they embody the form of a cloud. If you notice that you're having trouble being non-judgmental or non-reactive, towards a specific thought or cloud, I want you to be patient with yourself for a second. And I want you to just take some deep breaths and keep visualizing those clouds physically move further and further away from you in your awareness. After you finish this visualization for your last thought, I want you to slowly take another deep breath in through your nose and exhale through your mouth, bringing your present moment awareness back to your current environment. And then feel free to join me whenever you're ready. Yeah.
Feel so relaxed.
That was so good.
Yeah. So that's one thing I would actually give you.
No, thank you for that. 'Cause
Yes.
it's true. It goes beyond saying breathe, and almost for me, at least, sometimes when folks say breathe, I feel triggered. Like I'm more like, what do you mean breathe? Like, what do you mean breathe? Like, this is a big deal, what I'm telling you. So I think in terms of just like, no, it goes beyond that. It's more like, actually take a moment and think about what's happening and think about why you're so.
I also kind of want to give people permission, because I have when you're having that anxiety moment and you do take that moment to, and maybe it's not like in that very second that you're like doing the whole breathing moment, because you might be outside or whatever the situation is, but you're like taking a moment to not say anything and you're going to deal with it later. Jaleesa, you tell me, like, is it okay to then approach someone else, to approach that person that maybe you felt attacked by or have that anxiety towards later on, to be like, hey, I'd like to discuss with you how, yesterday you made me feel about blah.
Yeah.
You think, is that still okay? Because I know some people are like, well, you ain't say it in the moment. Why you ain't saying it? Like, well, then you need time to reflect.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to having very open communication. Like, even in those moments when you can't deal with it or you're so emotionally activated, it's okay to be like, you know what, I need a minute or I need a day to process this. Like, I'm having a real response and I don't want to say anything that's out of context or that, doesn't really express how I'm feeling and why I'm feeling this way. And so it's okay to be like, I need a timeout. Like an adult timeout. Like, I just need to take a break real quick and I'm gonna come back and we'll talk about what happened here. Because I think also, to your point, even about breathing, people just say breathe and they don't tell you, hey, there's a specific way I'm telling you to breathe that actually is gonna help calm your nervous system. Not the day-to-day breathing we do every day without realizing it to stay alive, but I need you to actually stop and do some of those deep, from your diaphragm, breaths in and slowly out through your mouth. And so even counting is sometimes helpful for knowing, like, slow your breath down, because that, I'm on edge or I'm like ready to go. That's not breathing. That's not going to do anything. I need you to slow it down. That's what's making you feel calm.
Yeah, I love that. My therapist did tell me, like, take a breath, hold it. Take another breath, hold it, release, hold. So I was like, okay, so
meditation's good. That's a lot with that too. I mean, that's part of the reason why we play this game, is like we play this game for two reasons, and all of a sudden we're like,
it's in a whole moment.
Because I think something else that I do want to make sure that we touch on is, yes, the whole idea of like potentially you need a minute and you come back and have that conversation. But I think as a whole, and this is me generalizing so much around our society and our generation, but I think we have a tendency to expect that someone else should listen to you. You know what I mean? So it's one thing to have like this whole thing about, can I tell you how I feel? Or can I tell you how you specifically did X, Y, and Z to me? I think we have to too be okay with someone not wanting to hear it, and or potentially saying like, not everything is, things are necessary to be said for sure, but like recognize that there are two sides to the coin. Like, yes, we can have that conversation, but also no, we don't need to have that conversation. And sometimes that no shouldn't be taken as potentially like, oh my gosh, this person needs therapy. This person is dismissive. It's more like people have a choice in every single thing in life, and a choice.
And I think that also goes back to the choice too, with then figuring out that person gets that rejection, to then figure out how you would like to move forward in that new relationship, because now it has for you because your perspective is different of that person. And that's okay too, to be like, you know what, you were someone I considered close. I now feel rejected. You don't want to hear me out. I can move you to another tier.
Or thinking that as rejection, you know, because that's another thinking that as something that's rejection, or thinking that as something that's like, now we gotta recognize things, versus thinking at like, no, like, you know, I'm setting my boundaries here with you too. Like, it's more like, this is something that I don't receive as positive or negative. So just curious, just wanted to
but even thinking that deeply.
Yes. Or taking
right. Exactly. Or even thinking that deeply, because that takes a lot of insight to realize I feel this is rejection, which is why I'm so triggered. Most people would take it as, you don't care about me, you don't fuck with me. Right. That's how most people would process it as, without even realizing it feels like rejection, or that you don't care about me. And I've gotten messages in the past that I feel like I don't care, like people don't care about me, or I'm not cared for. And then not knowing also that other person's history of like, it's a lot, and I'm afraid of conflict. Maybe I don't know how to deal with this right now, right? It's all about, I think, where it comes into play is that compromise of like, we have to respect each other in the sense of like, I need to know what you need and you need to know what I need, and we need to figure out how to meet in the middle. So maybe me telling you I need that timeout helps with your fear of rejection or abandonment, or people don't care about you. And you know, like, I still want to talk to you about this, but not right now. And then maybe you giving me that space to actually be able to formulate what it is I'm upset about or feeling, or whatever the case may be, is enough for me to be able to regulate, so I can come back to you and feel this is a safe space to have this conversation. Because maybe I'm scared you're going to blow up, and I've been around that as a child, and I'm gonna go on defense. We're going to end up fighting. We're going to end up throwing bows or whatever it is, because I just don't know. This is unsafe, you know? Right. And so it's like all about needing to be able to compromise with people and really like take a step back and self-reflect, like what's happening for me right now.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's so important to definitely be aware of the other person. I think, you know, I have a friend who is like, did you ask me permission to tell me about your day? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, he's very much so on his like self-care, journey, where he doesn't want to feel like he's being unloaded on, especially if he's had like a rough day, that then you're like complaining and telling about, like, I don't want to hear that today. What if, like, and it's okay to have those boundaries, like, you know what, I don't want to talk to you today, and I don't want to hear about your man problems, because right now I'm having my own situation and I don't want to hear it, and that's okay to like, say yes and no.
Say yes and no. I think it goes back to the beginning, because it depends on the person too. Like, some people are okay with listening because that's all they're at the end of the day doing. They're just, they are not the ones that are going to take it upon themselves to find some sort of solution for you, help you out in that regards. They're okay with listening, or they're okay with talking, because at the end of the day, I'm going to hang up the phone and like, good luck, sis. You know, whereas some folks are like, I don't want to hear this, because if you bring this to me, I know I now need to do something about this. You know what I mean? And perhaps the reasons are so much more, but those are the two that I'm thinking of.
Yeah. But I think that's where the permission asking comes in, just to be like, hey, I'm really feeling emotional today. Like, is it okay if I share with you? And then to be like, you know, actually today's not a good day.
Or somebody can be honest. I don't have the bandwidth today.
No, I don't have
the bandwidth. Come back tomorrow. I'll be ready, you know?
Yeah, exactly. To just process. But you know what? We've had
we can do this all day, but
episode with you today, Jaleesa. Like, we've had such a good time. I love the breathing. That's something that people can listen to over and over again if they're having a difficult time with anxiety or stress or depression or anything that they just need to take a moment to. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And we want to give you the space right now to kind of give yourself a shout out, tell people where they can find you on social media, if that's your thing. You don't have to worry about it. But where can they find services or your services, reach out to you if they need a therapist?
Yeah, so right now I am working with a group called Thrive Psychology Group. And so they can look for me there. We also have an Instagram. We have a website. I have a personal kind of like work Instagram that people can go to for different tidbits and stuff like that on mental health. That's called Nurture Your Inner Self, and that's on Instagram as well. So yeah, feel free to find me there and reach out if you ever want a consultation or need a potential therapist. I'm still accepting clients, but filling fast, so it may not be for long.
Right. Period. She's booked and busy, honey. Okay.
Yeah.
So, Akila, where can they find you on social?
Yes, you can find me chatting the media industry and life motivation, all with a dash of style. That is at my Instagram at Akila Friend and on all platforms. But Ebony, where can they find you?
Yes, you can find me chatting everything Black-owned business and of course the Black Creators Club at Ebony Chapman 12.
Keep up with the Black Creators Club at the Black Creators Club on all platforms.
Period too. Okay. And you guys remember to always abide by your ABCs.
Always be creating.
Bye.